The blood on the snow should have been the first warning sign. Ethan Cole stood frozen in his doorway, staring at the crimson trail that cut through the white canvas of Montana wilderness, leading from the tree line to something small and trembling against his cabin steps. The blizzard screamed around him with -20-degree fury, but all he could hear was his own heartbeat, that same primal rhythm that had kept him breathing through the chaos of combat. What he discovered that night would shatter his carefully constructed isolation in ways that 3 tours of duty never could. The palm-sized creature he mistook for an abandoned puppy would mature into something that made even seasoned wildlife officers reach for their weapons. But on that frozen February evening, Ethan had no idea he was about to welcome one of nature's most feared apex predators into his home as family. The bundle of midnight black fur was barely clinging to life when Ethan dropped to his knees beside it. No larger than a coffee mug, the creature's eyes were still sealed shut, its fragile body convulsing against the lethal wind. Before we continue this incredible journey, if stories about extraordinary bonds between humans and wild animals move your soul, consider subscribing to Loyal Protector Tales. Every subscription helps us share more of these remarkable tales that prove love transcends every boundary. Your support spreads the message that sometimes the wildest hearts forge the most unbreakable bonds. Ethan had retreated to this remote corner of Montana 8 months earlier, seeking refuge after the VA doctors had exhausted their arsenal of medications and therapy sessions for his PTSD. The nightmares ambushed him every night without mercy, phantom explosions that launched him from sleep drenched in sweat, the faces of fallen brothers carved into every shadow. His cabin, 20 miles from the nearest human being, was supposed to be his sanctuary of solitude, a place where he could crumble without witnesses. The puppy, if that's what it was, weighed almost nothing, cradled in his calloused hands. Ethan pressed it against his chest, tucking the dying animal inside his flannel shirt to feel that faint, fluttering heartbeat as he stumbled back inside. 20 years of military medical training surged through his muscle memory as he grabbed towels from the bathroom, stoked the wood stove to roaring life, and began the delicate work of coaxing warmth back into the frozen creature. The ice crystals melting from its fur revealed a coat so black it seemed to devour light itself. As Ethan worked, massaging circulation back into the tiny limbs with practiced precision, he registered that the paws seemed disproportionately large for such a small animal. But exhaustion and desperation overrode any deeper questions. "Come on, little fighter," Ethan murmured, his voice rough from weeks of silence. He hadn't spoken to another living soul since November. "Don't you dare quit on me now." The creature stirred weakly, a threadbare whimper escaping its throat. Ethan had witnessed enough death in the desert to recognize when something was battling for survival, and this fragile thing was battling with everything it had. He prepared warm water mixed with canned milk from his sparse pantry, using a dropper from his field medical kit to feed the animal with painstaking care. Drop by precious drop, vitality seemed to seep back into the small body. By 3 in the morning, it was breathing steadily, nested in a fortress of towels beside the crackling wood stove. Ethan collapsed into his recliner, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of that tiny chest. For the first time in months, his mind wasn't replaying firefights or conducting threat assessments of every sound in the darkness. Instead, he was completely absorbed by this small life he'd wrestled from the jaws of the storm. When dawn finally clawed through the clouds the next morning, both Ethan and the puppy had survived the night, though Ethan would later understand that this was actually the moment both their lives truly began. The nearest veterinarian was in Kalispell, a brutal 2-hour drive on clear days. The roads were still choked with snow, but Ethan bundled the puppy, whom he'd started calling Shadow for that light-absorbing black coat, and made the treacherous journey anyway. Dr. Patricia Mills had been treating Montana animals for 30 years, and she barely glanced up when Ethan walked in, carrying what appeared to be a German Shepherd mixed puppy. "Found him in the storm," Ethan explained, his words clipped and economical. "Need to make sure he'll make it." Patricia's examination was thorough but unremarkable. "Probably about 2 weeks old," she said, checking Shadow's gums and examining his needle-sharp teeth. "Definitely Shepherd genetics. Maybe some Malamute, judging by those paws." He's severely malnourished, but with proper care, he should recover well. You planning to keep him? Ethan hadn't actually considered the question until that precise moment. He'd acted on instinct, saving a life because it desperately needed saving. But as Shadow's tiny paw curled around his finger with surprising strength, he felt something crack open in his chest. Something he thought had calcified beyond repair. "Yeah," he heard himself say. "I'm keeping him." Patricia provided antibiotics, deworming medication, and specialized puppy formula. "He'll need feeding every 4 hours for the next few weeks," she cautioned. "It's an intensive commitment." "You sure you're up for it?" Ethan thought about his empty cabin, his sleepless nights stalked by ghosts, his days bleeding into each other without purpose or meaning. "I've got nothing but time, Doc." The cabin had become Ethan's tomb long before Shadow arrived. He'd purchased the property sight unseen, drawn by a single photograph showing a weathered structure surrounded by lodgepole pines, so remote that the real estate listing advertised the isolation as its primary feature. 20 miles from the nearest neighbor, no cell service, propane generator for electricity, a well that froze solid every January. It was perfect. Ethan had left Fort Bragg on a medical discharge 8 months prior, his service record decorated with commendations his therapist said he should be proud of. But pride required the ability to look at yourself in the mirror, and Ethan had stopped doing that around month 14 of his final deployment. The nightmares had started in Kandahar. His unit had been providing security for a medical convoy when the IED detonated. Ethan had been in the rear vehicle, far enough back to survive, close enough to see everything. 3 of his brothers died instantly. 2 more didn't make it through the night despite his frantic attempts at field medicine, his hands slick with blood that wasn't his own. He'd completed his tour, received his medals, sat through the mandatory counseling sessions where he said whatever the doctors needed to hear. But the moment his terminal leave began, Ethan had pointed his truck north and didn't stop driving until he found a place where the silence was louder than the explosions, still echoing in his skull. Montana delivered that silence in abundance. His daily routine had calcified into ritual. Wake at dawn, drenched in sweat from dreams he couldn't remember but felt in every muscle. Choke down coffee, chop wood until his shoulders screamed, stare at the forest, eat something from a can, chop more wood, watch the sunset, lie awake until exhaustion dragged him under, and the cycle began again. The VA had sent letters. His sister had called until he disconnected the landline. His former commanding officer had driven up once, knocked on the door for 20 minutes, then left a case of beer and a note that said, "When you're ready." Ethan had poured the beer into the snow and burned the note. He wasn't ready. He suspected he never would be. But now, with Shadow's feeding alarm chiming every 4 hours, Ethan's carefully constructed emptiness had been invaded. The puppy demanded attention with the tyranny of the helpless. Feeding times, temperature checks, cleaning up accidents, monitoring breathing patterns. For the first time since leaving the service, Ethan had a mission. Shadow grew stronger with alarming speed. By day 3, his eyes were open, piercing amber orbs that seemed to catalog Ethan's every movement with unsettling intelligence. By day 7, he was attempting to walk, his oversized paws making him stumble like a drunk. By day 10, he was following Ethan from room to room, whimpering if left alone for more than a few minutes. Ethan found himself talking to the puppy. Actual conversations, one-sided but therapeutic in ways his VA counselor's office had never achieved. "You're going to need a real name eventually," Ethan said one morning, watching Shadow attack a knotted rope with ferocious determination. "Shadow works for now, I guess. You're like a little shadow following me everywhere." Shadow paused his assault on the rope to look up at Ethan, head cocked, ears perked forward. Then he resumed his battle with renewed vigor, growling in a pitch that sounded almost like laughter. The nightmares didn't stop, but they changed. Instead of jolting awake to phantom gunfire, Ethan would surface to find Shadow pressed against his chest, those amber eyes watching him with what looked disturbingly like concern. The puppy's warmth and steady heartbeat would anchor him back to reality faster than any breathing exercise or prescription medication ever had. "You're a good boy, Shadow," Ethan would whisper in those dark hours. "You're a damn good boy." He had no idea how true those words would prove to be, or how much they would be tested. The first 2 weeks of Shadow's life in the cabin tested every ounce of Ethan's military discipline. The feeding schedule was relentless. Every 4 hours, day and night, Ethan would warm the specialized formula Dr. Mills had provided, test it against his wrist like he'd seen in movies, and carefully drop or feed Shadow while the puppy's tiny paws kneaded against his hand. The process took 30 minutes minimum, and Shadow had the appetite of something 3 times his size. Ethan's combat medical training had covered field triage, trauma response, and keeping soldiers alive long enough to reach an actual doctor. Nowhere in that curriculum had there been a section on bottle-feeding orphan puppies, but the fundamental principles were the same. Monitor vital signs, maintain body temperature, ensure adequate nutrition, watch for signs of distress. He created a feeding log, noting quantities and times with the same precision he'd once used for ammunition counts. Shadow's weight climbed steadily, 4 pounds, then 6, then 8. His coat thickened into a plush layer that Ethan found himself absently stroking while the puppy slept. The wood stove became their base camp. Ethan had positioned Shadow's nest of towels close enough for warmth, but far enough to avoid any risk. He'd drag his sleeping bag down from the loft each night, sleeping on the floor beside the puppy, rather than risk missing a feeding alarm. "This is temporary," Ethan told himself repeatedly, "just until he's stable." But even he didn't believe it. Shadow's personality emerged like spring breaking through Montana's endless winter. He was curious about everything, investigating each corner of the cabin with fearless intensity. He was playful, turning Ethan's bootlaces into mortal enemies that required immediate destruction. He was stubborn, refusing to sleep anywhere except within visual range of Ethan, and he was smart, disturbingly smart. By week 2, Shadow had learned his name. Not just recognition, actual comprehension. Ethan could say, "Shadow, come here," from across the room. And the puppy would abandon whatever mischief he was plotting to trot over. He learned sit in 2 sessions. Stay took longer, but only because Shadow's desire to be near Ethan overrode everything else. "You're too smart for your own good," Ethan muttered one afternoon after Shadow figured out how to open the cabinet where his food was stored. "We're going to have to get locks if you keep this up." The isolation that had felt suffocating before Shadow's arrival now felt protective. Ethan didn't want visitors, didn't want anyone disturbing the fragile routine they'd established. The outside world, with all its complications and expectations, could stay outside. Shadow had different ideas. One morning during week 3, Shadow stood at the door, whining with increasing agitation. Ethan, assuming it was a bathroom emergency, opened the door to let him out. Instead of the usual business, Shadow bounded into the snow, now almost 2 feet deep from the previous night's storm, and began leaping through it like a demented rabbit. Ethan stood in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, watching Shadow discover snow. The puppy would bury his entire face in a drift, come up snorting, then immediately dive back in. He'd attempt to catch snowflakes on his tongue, spinning in circles until he collapsed in dizzy confusion. For the first time in over a year, Ethan Cole laughed. It wasn't a chuckle or a polite smile. It was a full, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in his chest, a place he'd thought had been permanently sealed off. The sound was so foreign that it startled Shadow, who stopped mid-snow dive to stare at his human with cocked head and alert ears. "Yeah, buddy," Ethan said, grinning despite himself. "That was me. Guess I forgot how to do that." Shadow barked, a high-pitched, puppyish sound, and resumed his snow adventures with even more enthusiasm. Ethan stood there until his coffee went cold, watching a puppy play in the snow, feeling something very close to contentment. The darkness hadn't disappeared. The nightmares still came. The weight of what he'd lost in Afghanistan still pressed against his chest every morning. But for the first time since the explosion, Ethan had something to get up for beyond mere survival. He had Shadow. Shadow's eyes haunted Ethan's dreams, but not in the way the faces from Kandahar did. Those amber orbs held a depth that seemed impossible for a puppy barely 4 weeks old. They tracked Ethan's movements with laser focus, studying him with an intensity that sometimes made Ethan feel like he was the one being evaluated. In the firelight, They'd catch the glow and shine with an otherworldly brilliance that reminded Ethan of the wolves he'd seen in nature documentaries. But Shadow wasn't a wolf. Dr. Mills had confirmed he was a shepherd mix, probably some husky or Malamute, given the thick coat and those oversized paws. Ethan repeated this to himself whenever doubt crept in during the long nights. The puppy's presence was rewriting Ethan's relationship with silence. Before Shadow, the quiet of the cabin had been oppressive, a vacuum that the ghosts of his past rushed to fill. Now silence was punctuated by the soft sounds of Shadow sleeping, the gentle wheeze of his breathing, the occasional sleep yip as he chased rabbits through his puppy dreams, the rustle of him rearranging his blankets. Ethan's PTSD symptoms were shifting in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The nightmares still came, still jerked him awake with his heart hammering and his hands shaking, but the recovery time was shrinking. Instead of lying awake for hours, trapped in the memories, he'd feel Shadow climb onto the bed, a boundary that had dissolved within the first week despite Ethan's protests. The puppy would press his small body against Ethan's side, radiating warmth and steady calm. "You're not supposed to be on the bed," Ethan would murmur, making no effort to enforce the rule. Shadow would respond by pressing closer, and Ethan's breathing would gradually slow to match the puppy's rhythm. By week 5, Ethan realized he'd gone 3 consecutive nights without waking up screaming. 3 nights. It was a record that no medication or therapy had ever achieved. He'd started talking to Shadow like a person, narrating his thoughts and activities in a way that would have seemed insane before. But in the isolation of the Montana wilderness, with only a puppy for company, it felt perfectly natural. "All right, so here's the situation," Ethan said one morning while preparing breakfast. Shadow sat at attention, ears forward, watching every movement. "We're down to the last of the fresh eggs. That means tomorrow it's back to the powdered stuff, which I know you think is superior because I always give you some. But trust me, it's an abomination." Shadow's tail wagged, responding to Ethan's tone rather than the words. "I'm going to need to make a supply run into town soon, which means you're going to have to stay here alone for a few hours." I know. Shadow had started whining the moment Ethan said alone. "But that's the reality of living 20 miles from civilization. We can't both fit on the ATV, and it's too cold to leave you in the truck while I shop." The supply run, when it came a few days later, was harder than Ethan anticipated. He'd set up Shadow in his nest with extra blankets, filled water bowls, left toys scattered around, and still felt like he was abandoning a soldier behind enemy lines. 2 hours, max," Ethan promised, kneeling to scratch behind Shadow's ears. "You guard the cabin. I'll be back before you know it." Shadow's whine followed him out the door, a sound that carved through Ethan's chest like shrapnel. The trip to Kalispell was mechanical. Ethan moved through the grocery store in tactical mode. Identify objective, acquire target, extract. He spoke to no one beyond the necessary transaction with the cashier, but several people noticed him, and more specifically, noticed the difference in him. "You're looking better, Ethan," said Mrs. Garrison, who ran the feed store. She'd helped him set up accounts when he'd first arrived. "Got some color back in your face." Ethan managed a tight smile. "Just staying busy." "Good. Busy is good." She handed him his receipt. "You take care now." On the drive back, Ethan found himself accelerating slightly, eager to return. The cabin had been his prison for months, and now it felt like home. Not because of the structure, but because of who was waiting inside it. He could hear Shadow barking before he even killed the engine. The moment Ethan opened the door, the puppy launched himself forward with such enthusiasm that they both ended up in a heap on the floor, Shadow licking every inch of Ethan's face while his tail created a small windstorm. All right, Ethan laughed, trying to fend off the assault. "I was only gone 2 hours, you maniac." But he didn't push Shadow away. He sat on the floor of his cabin, arms around a puppy who was growing faster than seemed possible, and let himself feel what he'd been running from for over a year. Connection, purpose, something very close to joy. Shadow looked up at him with those knowing amber eyes, and Ethan could have sworn the puppy understood exactly what this moment meant. "You're saving my life, buddy," Ethan whispered. "You know that?" Shadow's tail wagged harder. and Ethan finally understood what people meant when they talked about unconditional love. By week 6, Ethan couldn't deny that something was wrong. Shadow had tripled in size, his shoulder now reaching Ethan's knee. The puppy food Dr. Mills had recommended was disappearing at an alarming rate. Shadow was eating portions that would satisfy a full-grown retriever. His paws, already large, had grown to the size of Ethan's fists. The proportions were all wrong for a shepherd mix, even accounting for husky or Malamute genetics. But it was Shadow's behavior that truly unsettled Ethan. The puppy had developed hunting instincts that seemed far too sophisticated for his age. He'd freeze mid-play, head swiveling toward sounds Ethan couldn't hear, body locked in a point that would make a bird dog jealous. His movements had taken on a liquid quality, each step placed with deliberate precision, weight distributed for optimal balance. Ethan had watched enough nature documentaries during his sleepless nights to recognize predatory behavior when he saw it. One morning, he watched Shadow stalk a mouse that had ventured into the cabin. The puppy's approach was methodical, low crawl, pausing when the mouse looked up, advancing during moments of inattention. The final pounce was executed with surgical precision, Shadow's jaws closing on the rodent with a quick snap that ended it instantly. "Jesus," Ethan muttered, watching Shadow drop the mouse and look up at him with an expression that seemed to ask, "Did you see that?" "Yeah, buddy, I saw it. That was, impressive." Too impressive. Disturbingly impressive. Shadow's vocalizations had changed as well. The high-pitched puppy bark had dropped into something deeper, more resonant. Sometimes late at night, Ethan would hear Shadow make a sound that was almost a howl, a testing of vocal range that sent chills down his spine. The physical changes were matched by intellectual development that defied explanation. Shadow had learned to open doors by watching Ethan once. He'd figured out that the sound of Ethan putting on boots meant an outdoor adventure, and would station himself by the door before Ethan finished lacing. He'd developed problem-solving skills that seemed to bypass the trial-and-error learning typical of puppies. "You're too smart," Ethan told him repeatedly. "Way too smart for a dog." Shadow would cock his head, amber eyes fixed on Ethan with that unnerving intensity. And Ethan would push the thought away. The first real test came during their morning walk, now a daily ritual. Ethan would hike through the forest, Shadow ranging ahead but always circling back to check in. The puppy's energy was boundless, his joy in the wilderness absolute. They'd ventured about a mile from the cabin when Shadow suddenly froze. Every muscle tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ethan's combat instincts kicked in immediately, hand dropping to the knife on his belt, eyes scanning the tree line, body positioning for threat response. A young black bear, probably just out of hibernation, emerged from the underbrush about 30 yards away. It was small, maybe 200 pounds, but still dangerous if provoked. "Shadow," Ethan said quietly, firmly. "Come here. Now." Shadow ignored him. The puppy, if he could still be called that, moved forward, placing himself directly between Ethan and the bear. His growl intensified, body rigid, every tooth visible. The sound that emerged from Shadow's chest wasn't a puppy's warning. It was pure predatory aggression. By week 8, Shadow had surpassed the size of any shepherd Ethan had ever seen, and the puppy phase was clearly over. He moved with the grace of a creature born to hunt, his amber eyes constantly scanning the environment with predatory focus. But he remained devoted to Ethan with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Ethan had stopped going into town. The supply runs felt like betrayals, leaving Shadow alone and anxious. Instead, he ordered online when possible, accepting that he was becoming more isolated than ever. But it didn't feel like isolation anymore. He had Shadow. The nightmares were down to maybe one per week, and even those were manageable. Ethan had started sleeping through entire nights, something that would have seemed impossible months ago. He'd gained back weight, his face less gaunt, his movements more fluid. He'd even started a project, building an addition to the cabin that could serve as a proper shelter for Shadow during the day while Ethan worked. "You're getting too big for the house," Ethan explained while measuring lumber. Shadow watched from a few feet away, head resting on his enormous paws. "Not that I'm kicking you out, just We need more space. You're like having a roommate who doesn't pay rent. Shadow's tail thumped against the ground. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was carrying an armload of firewood around the side of the cabin when he heard Shadow's warning growl, the one that meant danger. He dropped the wood, hand instinctively reaching for the pistol he'd started carrying after the bear incident. The mountain lion was massive, easily 150 pounds of pure muscle and predatory intent. It had been stalking Ethan from the rocks above the cabin, and only Shadow's keen senses had detected it. The big cat was crouched, ready to pounce, focused entirely on Ethan. Shadow exploded into motion. What happened next occurred in heartbeats, but Ethan's combat-trained mind captured every detail in crystal clarity. Shadow launched himself between Ethan and the lion, moving with speed that seemed to defy physics. His lips pulled back to reveal teeth that looked far too large, too sharp, too perfectly designed for killing. And then Shadow roared. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a growl, it was a sound that came from somewhere primal and ancient, a challenge that echoed off the mountains and made the hair on Ethan's arm stand on end. The sound carried authority, dominance, and a promise of violence. The mountain lion, an apex predator that feared nothing in these mountains, hesitated. Shadow roared again, advancing a step, his body coiled with lethal intent. The lion's ears flattened, its own predatory calculus recalibrating. Shadow took another step forward, and the mountain lion made its decision. It turned and bounded away, disappearing into the forest with speed born of self-preservation. Shadow held his aggressive posture for another full minute, making sure the threat was truly gone. Then he turned back to Ethan, and the transformation was instant. From apex predator to concerned companion. He rushed to Ethan, circling him, nosing at his hands, checking for injuries with frantic thoroughness. "I'm okay," Ethan managed, his voice shaking. "Shadow, I'm okay. You? Jesus Christ, you just faced down a mountain lion." Shadow sat, looking up at him, and Ethan saw something in those amber eyes that he'd been avoiding for weeks. Intelligence, yes. Loyalty, absolutely. But also something wild and untamed, something that was never meant to live in a cabin with a broken soldier. Ethan pulled out his phone. He kept it charged for emergencies despite the lack of signal. He'd taken dozens of photos of Shadow over the past weeks, documenting his growth. He pulled them up now, scrolling through them with new eyes. Week 1, palm-sized ball of fur. Week 2, doubled in size, eyes open. Week 4, 3 times the original size. Week 6, size of a full-grown shepherd. Week 8, larger than any dog Ethan had ever seen. He opened the browser, waited for the painfully slow satellite internet to load, and typed wolf puppy growth rate. The results loaded slowly, but what he saw made his blood run cold. Northwestern wolf pups, 3 to 4 pounds at birth, reaching 50 to 70 pounds by 6 months. Adult males, 100 to 130 pounds. Shadow was already over 90 pounds, at 8 weeks old. "No," Ethan said aloud, looking at Shadow, who watched him with concern. "No way. Dr. Mills would have known. She's been practicing for 30 years. She would have seen." But even as he said it, Ethan knew the truth. Shadow had been so young when they visited Dr. Mills, so malnourished and small, that any distinctive features would have been hard to identify. And Ethan, desperate to save the dying creature, had accepted the diagnosis he wanted to hear. He pulled up more images. Wolf pups, Northwestern wolves specifically. The facial structure, the ear placement, the paw size, the coat texture, everything matched. The pieces he'd been refusing to assemble slammed together with crushing certainty. Shadow wasn't a dog. He'd never been a dog. Ethan had rescued a wolf pup. He'd bottle-fed a wolf. He'd been sharing his cabin, his bed, his life with a wolf. And if he was right about this, everything was about to get exponentially more complicated. "Shadow," Ethan said quietly. The wolf, and he was a wolf, Ethan couldn't deny it anymore, immediately came to attention. "We need to take a trip to see Dr. Mills. And I think our lives are about to change." Shadow's tail wagged, trusting completely, having no idea that the truth Ethan had finally acknowledged could destroy everything they'd built together. Shadow just stood his ground against a mountain lion, but a much bigger threat is coming from the human world. You won't believe what the DNA test reveals in the next chapter. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a moment of Ethan and Shadow's journey. Dr. Patricia Mills looked at Ethan over her reading glasses. The DNA test results spread across her desk like an indictment. "I need you to understand something," she said carefully. "In 30 years of practice, I've never made a mistake like this. Ever." Ethan sat rigid in the chair across from her, Shadow lying at his feet in the clinic's examination room. The wolf, because that's what he was, rested his head on Ethan's boot, completely relaxed despite the fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. "Just tell me," Ethan said. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the armrests like they were the only things keeping him tethered to reality. Dr. Mills slid the laboratory report across the desk. 100% Canis lupus, northwestern wolf subspecies, purebred. Not a single domestic dog marker in his entire genetic profile. The words hung in the air between them, making everything real in a way that Ethan's own research hadn't accomplished. Seeing it in official laboratory letterhead, with genetic sequences and technical language, removed any possibility of denial. "How?" Ethan finally asked. "How did we miss this?" "He was so young when you brought him in," Dr. Mills said, and Ethan could hear the guilt in her voice. 2 weeks old, maybe less. Malnourished, dehydrated, eyes still closed. At that age, wolf pups and large breed dog puppies look remarkably similar. The diagnostic features that would have tipped me off, the specific facial structure, the foot shape, the tooth development, none of those had manifested yet. And honestly, she gestured at Shadow, I wasn't looking for a wolf. We don't see wolves in veterinary clinics. They're born wild, they stay wild. Except him. Except him, Dr. Mills agreed. She studied Shadow with professional fascination. "Ethan, do you understand what you've done? You've hand-raised a northwestern wolf from infancy. You've imprinted him on humans, on you specifically, during his critical socialization window. There's maybe a handful of cases like this in recorded history." "Is that legal?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "No." Dr. Mills' expression turned grim. "Montana law is very clear. Private ownership of wolves is prohibited. Period. There are no permits, no exceptions. If Fish, Wildlife, and Parks finds out about Shadow, they'll seize him immediately." "And then what?" Dr. Mills hesitated. "Best case scenario, they relocate him to a sanctuary. Worst case..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Ethan understood. An imprinted wolf that was too comfortable around humans was a liability. They'd euthanize him to prevent any possibility of future incidents. "No." The word came out flat, final. "That's not happening." "Ethan, I said no." Ethan leaned forward, his combat instincts recognizing this as a tactical situation requiring immediate strategy. "What are my options?" Dr. Mills rubbed her temples. "Legally, you don't have any. You need to surrender him. Not legal options, practical ones." She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw the moment her professional obligations collided with her personal ethics. She glanced at Shadow, who was watching them both with alert attention, clearly sensing the tension. "The clinic's policy is that I should report this to FWUP immediately," she said slowly. "That's what I'm supposed to do. But that report doesn't get filed until I complete my clinical notes, which I haven't done yet, and I'm behind on paperwork, have been for weeks, might take me a while to catch up." Ethan understood. She was giving him time. "How long?" "Maybe a week before someone asks why this DNA test hasn't been properly documented. After that, I'm legally obligated to file." She met his eyes. "You seem like a good man, Ethan, and that animal clearly loves you. But you need to understand what you're up against. Montana takes wolf management very seriously. They will remove him, and they won't care about your bond or his temperament or any of it." Ethan looked down at Shadow, who gazed back with those knowing amber eyes. The wolf had saved his life in more ways than one, had given him a reason to wake up every morning, had quieted the nightmares that no medication could touch, had shown him that connection was still possible even for someone as broken as he'd become. He defended me against a mountain lion last week, Ethan said quietly. Did I mention that? This young wolf, because he's not even 4 months old yet, stood between me and a 150-pound predator and roared it off. He could have run, should have run, but he chose to protect me instead. That's remarkable, Dr. Mills admitted, and incredibly dangerous information to share if this goes to court. If it goes to court? Ethan's head snapped up. When? Dr. Mills corrected gently. When it goes to court, because that's where this ends, Ethan. You can run, hide him, keep him secret for a while, but eventually someone will see him, someone will report him, and then you're looking at criminal charges on top of losing him. Or, she paused, weighing her words carefully, or you get ahead of it. You document everything, his temperament, his training, his bond with you. You find a lawyer who specializes in wildlife law. You make the case that Shadow isn't a threat, that the circumstances of his rescue were unique, that removing him would be cruel to an animal that's been socialized as a domestic companion? Has that ever worked? Honestly, I don't know. But I know trying to hide a 130-pound wolf in Montana isn't a sustainable strategy. Ethan stood and Shadow immediately rose with him, pressing against his leg. The wolf's head reached nearly to Ethan's waist now, and he showed no signs of stopping his growth. Within a few months, he'd be fully mature, an apex predator in every sense. Thank you for the time, Ethan said, and for the honesty. Dr. Mills nodded. Ethan, whatever you decide, be careful. The people who enforce these laws, they see wolves as threats, not individuals. They won't see what I see when I look at Shadow. They'll just see a dangerous, wild animal that needs to be removed. Then I'll make them see what you see, Ethan replied, because Shadow isn't leaving, not without a fight. Shadow followed him out of the clinic, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon, trusting completely in the human who'd saved his life. Ethan just hoped that trust wasn't misplaced. The wolves came on a Thursday night, under a moon so full, it turned the Montana snow into a field of silver. Ethan heard them first, a chorus of howls echoing from the forest, wild and haunting and ancient. Shadow, who'd been sleeping by the fireplace, bolted upright, every muscle tensed, his head swiveling toward the sound. Easy, buddy, Ethan said, though his own pulse had quickened. He'd known this moment might come. Wild wolves had territories, and his cabin sat within range of at least 2 different packs according to his research. Shadow moved to the window, placing his front paws on the sill to peer out into the darkness. Another howl rose, closer this time, and Shadow's entire body vibrated with tension. They're calling to you, Ethan said quietly. He'd been dreading this conversation for days, ever since the truth about Shadow's species had been confirmed. That's your family out there, Shadow. Your real family. Shadow glanced back at him, then returned his attention to the window. Ethan had spent the week since the DNA results wrestling with an impossible question. What gave him the right to keep Shadow? The wolf hadn't chosen domestication. He'd been rescued as a dying pup, imprinted on a human during his most vulnerable developmental phase, and now existed in a liminal space between wild and tame. Was Ethan saving Shadow, or had he condemned him to a half-life, neither fully wild nor truly domestic? I don't know what the right answer is, Ethan admitted, moving to stand beside the wolf. Through the window he could see them now, 4 shadows moving through the trees at the forest edge. Their eyes caught the moonlight, glowing yellow-green in the darkness. Maybe you should be with them. Maybe that's where you belong. Shadow whined, a sound of confusion and longing mixed together. The law says I have to give you up, Ethan continued, his voice rough. But the law doesn't know you like I do. It doesn't know that you sleep across my feet every night, or that you've learned to open doors, or that you bring me your toys when you think I'm sad. It doesn't know that you've given me a reason to keep living when I'd stop seeing the point. Another howl, and this time Shadow responded with his own, a sound that started deep in his chest and rose to a mournful cry that made Ethan's heart clench. It was pure wolf, pure wild, and it reminded Ethan that no matter how domesticated Shadow seemed, he was still a predator, still an animal with instincts that transcended training. If you want to go, Ethan said, and the words cost him everything, I'll open the door. Right now. No collar, no leash, no restraint. You can go be with your own kind, live the life you were meant to have. I won't stop you. He moved to the door, hand on the knob, waiting. Shadow looked at him, then at the window, then back again. The wild pack howled once more, and Shadow's ears swiveled toward the sound. This was it, the moment of choice. Ethan was giving Shadow the freedom to decide his own fate, and whatever the wolf chose, Ethan would have to accept it. I love you, buddy, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Whatever you decide, I love you. You saved my life. Now I'm trying to save yours, even if that means letting you go. He opened the door. The cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of pine and snow and wild things. Shadow stood at the threshold, body tense, every instinct pulling him toward the forest. He took one step forward onto the porch. The wild wolves moved closer, their forms more visible now. They were magnificent, powerful, graceful, utterly at home in the wilderness. One of them, larger than the others and clearly the alpha, fixed its gaze on Shadow and howled an invitation. Shadow's muscles bunched. He was going to run. Ethan could see it in every line of the wolf's body. He was going to answer the call of the wild, join his true family, and Ethan would watch the one good thing in his life disappear into the forest. But then Shadow turned around. He looked at Ethan with those amber eyes, and something passed between them that transcended species, transcended language. Shadow took a step back into the cabin, then another. He moved past Ethan, back to his spot by the fireplace, and sat down. The message was clear. This is my pack. You are my pack. Ethan stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face, watching the wild wolves fade back into the forest. They howled once more, a sound of disappointment or acceptance, he couldn't tell. And then they were gone. He closed the door and sat down on the floor next to Shadow, burying his face in the wolf's thick fur. Shadow leaned into him, offering comfort the way he'd done so many times during Ethan's nightmares. You chose me, Ethan whispered. Even when I gave you the chance to leave, you chose me. Shadow's tail thumped against the floor, and Ethan understood that whatever battles lay ahead, legal, ethical, practical, they would face them together. Shadow had made his decision. Now Ethan had to honor that choice by fighting for the right to keep him. I won't let them take you, Ethan promised, his hands gripping Shadow's fur. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what anyone says. You're family, and I protect my family. Shadow licked his face, and for the first time since learning the truth about his wolf species, Ethan felt something like hope. They would find a way. They had to. The Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks officers arrived on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after Dr. Mills had given Ethan his head start. Ethan had known they were coming. Dr. Mills had called, risking her license to give him warning, saying the paperwork had been filed, the report submitted. The state had moved with bureaucratic efficiency once Shadow's existence became official. I'm sorry, she'd said. I bought you as much time as I could. Ethan had spent those 2 weeks documenting everything. Videos of Shadow responding to commands, photographs showing the wolf's gentle temperament, written accounts of how Shadow had improved his PTSD symptoms. He'd contacted 3 different lawyers specializing in wildlife law, though none of them had been optimistic about his chances. Montana doesn't make exceptions for wolves, they'd all said in various ways. The law is absolute. But Ethan was a soldier. He'd faced impossible odds before. He knew that sometimes the only option was to hold your ground and fight, even when the outcome seemed predetermined. When the FWP truck pulled up, Shadow was outside with Ethan, playing in the snow. The wolf had grown even larger over the past weeks, nearly 110 pounds now, with the build of an apex predator. But he was still young, still playful, still the same animal who'd burrow under Ethan's blankets during thunderstorms. Ethan Cole? The lead officer was a woman in her 40s, her expression professional but not unkind. I'm Officer Samantha Reeves, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. This is Officer Marcus Chen. We're here about the wolf. Shadow, Ethan corrected, keeping his voice level. Shadow had moved to stand beside him, sensing the tension. His name is Shadow. Officer Reeves glanced at Shadow, and Ethan saw the flash of surprise in her eyes. The wolf was magnificent, his coat gleaming black in the winter sun, his amber eyes alert and intelligent, his posture protective but not aggressive. "Mr. Cole, you're aware that private ownership of wolves is illegal in Montana?" "I am." "Then you know we're here to take the animal into custody." "His name is Shadow," Ethan repeated, "and I'm asking you to reconsider. I have documentation." "Mr. Cole," Officer Chen interrupted, his hand moving to the tranquilizer rifle strapped to his back. "This isn't a negotiation. Step away from the animal." Shadow's lips pulled back slightly, a warning, not a threat. Just a sign that he'd noticed the aggressive body language. Ethan placed a hand on Shadow's head, and the wolf immediately relaxed. "You see that?" Ethan said. "He responds to me. He's not a wild animal anymore. He's been socialized, trained, imprinted. Taking him now would be cruel. It would be a death sentence. That should have been considered before you decided to illegally raise a wolf," Officer Reeves said, though her tone had softened slightly. "I understand you have a bond with the animal, Mr. Cole, but the law is clear. Wolves are dangerous predators and—" The roar that split the air cut her off mid-sentence. It came from the forest behind the cabin, a sound that made Shadow's warning growl from weeks ago seem like a whisper. Every human present felt it in their chest, a bass note of pure aggression that triggered ancient prey instincts. Officer Chen spun, bringing his rifle up. "What the hell was that?" "Grizzly," Ethan said, his military training reading the situation instantly. "Big one, from that sound. Probably male, possibly rabid, given that he's not in hibernation yet. We need to get to the vehicles," Officer Reeves said, already backing away. "Now." But it was too late. The grizzly exploded from the tree line, and Ethan's estimation had been conservative. This wasn't just big, it was massive, easily 500 pounds of muscle and rage. Its eyes were wrong, showing the telltale signs of disease. Foam flecked its muzzle. A rabid grizzly was one of nature's most dangerous phenomena, an apex predator stripped of its natural caution and driven by madness, and it was charging straight at them. "Don't run," Ethan shouted, but Officer Chen panicked, firing the tranquilizer rifle. The dart hit the bear's shoulder, but the dosage designed for a wolf was laughably inadequate for a grizzly. It didn't even slow down. Officer Reeves was fumbling for her service weapon, but Ethan knew it wouldn't be enough. A 9mm pistol might eventually bring down a bear, but not before it killed at least one of them. Shadow didn't hesitate. The wolf launched himself between the charging grizzly and the humans, moving with speed that seemed impossible for something his size. He hit the ground in a defensive stance, every tooth bared, and released a roar that matched the bear's in volume and exceeded it in fury. The grizzly slowed, confused. Its diseased brain was telling it to attack, but it was facing something it had never encountered. A wolf willing to stand against it alone, defending humans. "Shadow, no!" Ethan screamed, trying to move forward, but Officer Reeves grabbed his arm. "You'll just get both of you killed!" The grizzly charged again, and Shadow met it head-on. What followed was the most terrifying minute of Ethan's life, and he'd survived 3 combat tours. Shadow was fast, impossibly fast, darting in to bite at the bear's legs and face, then dancing back before the massive paws could connect. But he was also outmatched in size and power. One solid hit would kill him. The bear caught Shadow with a glancing blow that sent the wolf tumbling. Shadow yelped, the first sound of pain Ethan had ever heard from him, and Ethan broke free from Officer Reeves's grip. "Get to your truck," he shouted at the officers. "Radio for backup." He ran to his cabin, grabbing the hunting rifle he kept mounted inside the door. It was loaded with 30 .06 rounds, designed for elk but adequate for bear if you knew where to shoot. By the time he returned, Shadow was back on his feet, limping but still fighting. The wolf had managed to tear open the bear's shoulder, but he was bleeding from multiple wounds. The grizzly was preparing for another charge, and Shadow was too injured to dodge. Ethan didn't hesitate. He raised the rifle, aimed for the spot where the bear's neck met its skull, and fired. The shot echoed across the valley. The grizzly dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before it hit the ground. Ethan was already running to Shadow, dropping the rifle in the snow. The wolf was collapsed on his side, breathing heavily, blood staining his black fur crimson. "Stay with me," Ethan begged, his hands moving over Shadow's body, checking for serious wounds. "Come on, buddy. You don't get to save my life and then die on me. That's not how this works." Shadow's amber eyes found his, and incredibly, the wolf's tail managed a weak wag. Officer Reeves appeared beside them, her face pale. "Is he needs a vet," Ethan said. "Now, help me get him to my truck." "Mr. Cole, we're still legally obligated to." "That wolf just saved all our lives." Ethan turned on her, his eyes blazing. "That dangerous predator put himself between us and 500 pounds of rabid grizzly. He could have run, should have run, but he stayed and fought because that's who he is. So you can cite me, arrest me, throw me in jail, but right now, we're getting Shadow to Dr. Mills. And you're going to help me, or I swear to God." He didn't finish the threat, but Officer Reeves could see in his face that he meant every word. "Chen," she called to her partner, "help us get the wolf loaded. We're escorting them to the veterinary clinic in Whitefish." Officer Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd watched the same scene everyone else had. He'd seen Shadow's courage and loyalty. He nodded and helped lift the wolf into Ethan's truck. As they raced down the mountain roads, lights flashing, Shadow's head rested in Ethan's lap. The wolf's breathing was labored, his eyes half closed. "You're the bravest thing I've ever seen," Ethan whispered, stroking Shadow's blood-matted fur. "Human or animal, in all my years of service, I've never seen courage like that. You're going to make it. You hear me? You're going to make it. And then we're going to figure out how to keep you home where you belong." Shadow's tail moved slightly against the seat, and Ethan held on to that small sign of life, like a lifeline. Officer Reeves drove in grim silence, her hands tight on the wheel, knowing that what she'd witnessed had just changed everything. Shadow has proven his loyalty in blood, but the law is still closing in. Can Ethan find a way to save his best friend? Stay tuned for the emotional conclusion and hit that like button if you believe Shadow deserves to stay home. The hearing took place 6 weeks after the Grizzly attack, in a courtroom in Kalispell that was packed beyond capacity. Shadow's story had gone viral. The video footage from Officer Chen's body camera, showing the wolf's defense of the humans against the rabid bear, had spread across social media with stunning speed. News outlets had picked it up. Wildlife experts had weighed in. The public had been captivated by the impossible bond between a broken soldier and a wolf who'd chosen love over instinct. But viral attention didn't change Montana law, and the state was still demanding Shadow's removal. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, dressed in the only suit he owned, purchased specifically for this hearing. Shadow lay beside him, a special accommodation granted by the judge after Shadow's veterinarian had testified that separating them caused both severe distress. The wolf had recovered from his injuries, though he now bore scars from the bear's claws, badges of honor that he wore proudly. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Margaret Thornton presiding." Judge Thornton was in her 60s, with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen everything Montana wildlife law could throw at them. She surveyed the packed courtroom with an expression that gave nothing away. "This is highly irregular," she began once everyone was seated. "In my 25 years on this bench, I've never had a case quite like this one. The law regarding private ownership of wolves in Montana is clear and unambiguous. And yet," she looked at Shadow, who met her gaze with calm intelligence, "circumstances have arisen that warrant examination." The state's attorney, a young man named Davidson, who clearly wished he'd been assigned any other case, stood to present his argument. It was straightforward. Ethan had violated Montana Statute 87-4801, which explicitly prohibited private ownership of wolves. The law existed to protect public safety and wildlife management interests. Shadow, regardless of his individual temperament, represented a dangerous precedent. "If we make an exception in this case," Davidson argued, "we open the door for others to claim special circumstances. The law must be applied equally or it becomes meaningless." Then it was the defense's turn. Ethan's lawyer, Janet Rodriguez, had taken his case pro bono after seeing the body camera footage. She was one of the top wildlife attorneys in the state, and she'd built her argument carefully. Your Honor, the state is correct that Mr. Cole technically violated the statute. But the statute was written with the assumption that we're dealing with adults attempting to capture and domesticate wild wolves. That's not what happened here. Mr. Cole rescued a dying 2-week-old pup during a blizzard. He had no way of knowing the animal's species, a fact confirmed by Dr. Patricia Mills, who has 30 years of veterinary experience. By the time the truth was known, Shadow had been completely socialized to humans during his critical developmental window. He is, for all practical purposes, neither fully wild nor fully domestic. He exists in a category that our law never anticipated. She pulled up the body camera footage on the courtroom screen. Everyone had seen it, but watching it again, seeing Shadow put himself between the humans and the bear, was still powerful. This is not a dangerous wild animal, Rodriguez continued. This is a therapeutic companion who has demonstrably improved Mr. Cole's PTSD symptoms, a fact attested to by his VA psychologist. This is an animal who, when given the choice between returning to the wild and staying with his human, chose his human. And this is an animal who proved, at risk to his own life, that he can distinguish between threats and innocence, that he can control his predatory instincts in defense of others. She paused, letting that sink in. The state argues that making an exception would be dangerous precedent. I argue that refusing to acknowledge unique circumstances is rigid adherence to the letter of the law while violating its spirit. The law exists to protect people from dangerous wolves. Shadow has proven he's no danger to anyone except those who threaten his family. The judge called Dr. Mills to the stand. The veterinarian testified about Shadow's health, his behavior, his bond with Ethan. She was asked if she believed Shadow posed a public safety risk. No, she said firmly. In my professional opinion, Shadow poses less risk than many domestic dog breeds. He's well-trained, responsive to commands, and has never shown aggression except in legitimate defense situations. Then came testimony from officers Reeves and Chen. They'd been subpoenaed by the state, but their testimony didn't go as Davidson had hoped. Did the wolf threaten you before the bear arrived? Rodriguez asked Officer Reeves. No, he was clearly protective of Mr. Cole, but he never approached us aggressively. And when the bear attacked? Officer Reeves looked at Shadow, who lay calmly beside Ethan despite the courtroom full of strangers. That wolf saved our lives, Ms. Rodriguez. I've seen trained police dogs who wouldn't do what he did. He assessed the threat, positioned himself defensively, and held off a rabid grizzly long enough for us to get to safety and for Mr. Cole to get his rifle. If it weren't for Shadow, I wouldn't be here today. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thornton gavelled for silence. The hearing lasted 4 hours, with expert testimony from wildlife biologists, psychologists, and animal behaviorists. Some argued for Shadow's removal, citing the precedent issue. Others argued that his unique circumstances warranted special consideration. Finally, Judge Thornton called for closing statements. Davidson kept his brief. Your Honor, we ask that you uphold Montana law and order the wolf's removal to an appropriate sanctuary facility. Rodriguez stood, but before she could speak, Ethan rose beside her. Your Honor, he said, his voice rough with emotion. May I say something? Judge Thornton studied him for a long moment. This is highly irregular, Mr. Cole. You have legal representation. I know, Your Honor, but this is my life we're talking about, mine and Shadow's, and I need to say this myself. The judge nodded. Proceed, but keep it brief. Ethan took a breath, then spoke from the heart. I'm a combat veteran. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and I came home with PTSD so severe that the VA gave up on treating me. I moved to Montana to be alone, to fall apart where no one could see. I was waiting to die, Your Honor. Not actively suicidal, but not really living either. Just existing. He placed his hand on Shadow's head. The wolf looked up at him with those amber eyes. Then I found this tiny creature dying in the snow, and I saved him, not knowing what he was, not caring. I just knew something needed help, and I could provide it. And in saving him, he saved me. He gave me a reason to wake up. He quieted the nightmares. He showed me that I wasn't too broken to care about something. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. The law says he's a dangerous wild animal, but the law doesn't know what I know. It doesn't know that he sleeps with his head on my chest during thunderstorms. It doesn't know that he learned to bring me my medication bottle when I forget to take my pills. It doesn't know that when I'm having a flashback, he leans against me until I remember where I am. He looked directly at Judge Thornton. Shadow isn't just a pet, Your Honor. He's not even just a companion. He's my reason for living. And I'm asking you to please don't take that away from me. Don't take him away from the only life he's ever known. He chose me over the wild. Let us choose to stay together. The courtroom was silent. Judge Thornton's expression was unreadable. Thank you, Mr. Cole. You may be seated. The judge reviewed her notes, the silence stretching unbearably. Finally, she looked up. This court finds that while Mr. Cole did technically violate Montana Statute 87-4801, the circumstances of that violation are sufficiently unique to warrant special consideration. The animal in question was rescued as a juvenile, was impossible to identify as a wolf at the time of rescue, and has been socialized during his critical developmental period in a manner that fundamentally alters his behavioral profile. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear. Furthermore, the animal has demonstrated extraordinary judgment and restraint, as evidenced by the incident with the grizzly bear. While this court is deeply concerned about setting precedent, we must also acknowledge that rigid application of law without consideration for exceptional circumstances serves no one. Judge Thornton looked at Shadow, then at Ethan. Therefore, this court grants Mr. Cole a conditional license to retain custody of the wolf designated as Shadow, subject to the following requirements: annual behavioral assessments by a certified wildlife veterinarian, maintenance of liability insurance in the amount of $1 million, permanent microchipping and GPS tracking, restrictions on public exhibition, and immediate notification to Montana FWP if the animal displays any aggressive behavior toward humans. The courtroom exploded in applause. Ethan felt his knees go weak, and he sank into his chair, burying his face in Shadow's fur, while the wolf's tail thumped against the floor. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd actually won. 3 months later, on a clear Montana night, Ethan sat on his porch with Shadow beside him. The wolf was fully grown now, a magnificent specimen of Canis lupus, powerful and graceful, and completely at peace. From the forest came the sound of the wild pack howling at the moon. Shadow's ears perked, and he looked at Ethan as if asking permission. "Go ahead, buddy," Ethan said with a smile. Shadow threw back his head and howled, his voice joining the chorus of his wild cousins. But where they sang from the forest, Shadow sang from beside his human, his chosen pack. Ethan joined in, his own voice rough but joyful, howling at the moon like a madman. And for the first time since the explosion in Kandahar, Ethan Cole felt completely, utterly at peace. Two broken souls had found each other in a blizzard. Together, they'd built something that transcended species, transcended law, transcended everything that should have kept them apart. Love had won, family had won, and somewhere in the Montana wilderness, a soldier and his wolf sang their victory to the stars. Ethan and Shadow's story teaches us something profound about the healing power of connection and the courage it takes to love again after trauma. Ethan had given up on himself. He'd retreated to the wilderness, convinced he was too broken to ever connect with another living soul. Shadow was dying, abandoned, clinging to life by a thread. Both were casualties of circumstances beyond their control, one of war, one of nature's cruelty. But when Ethan chose to save Shadow, even when it would have been easier to look away, he set in motion a transformation that would save them both. He didn't rescue Shadow because he thought he'd get something in return. He did it because it was the right thing to do, because a life needed saving, because in that moment of mercy, his humanity overrode his pain. And Shadow, when given the choice between the wild freedom of his ancestors and the imperfect love of a wounded human, chose connection over instinct. He chose loyalty over liberty. He chose to stay when every fiber of his being told him to run. The deepest lesson here is this: we are never too broken to matter. We are never so damaged that we can't offer love. And sometimes the act of saving another soul is exactly what we need to save ourselves. Ethan thought he was rescuing a dying puppy. In reality, he was answering a call to his own salvation. Shadow thought he was being cared for by his pack leader. In reality, he was becoming a healer, a guardian, a living reminder that love transcends species, circumstance, and even the law itself. Their bond proved that connection doesn't require perfection. Ethan had PTSD, nightmares, and trauma that no pill could fix. Shadow was a wild predator, genetically programmed for the forest, not the fireside. Neither was supposed to work. Yet together they created something more powerful than either could have been alone. When the world tells you that you're too damaged, too different, too wild, or too broken to deserve love and belonging, remember Ethan and Shadow. Remember that a soldier with crushing PTSD and a wolf pup the size of a coffee mug built a bond strong enough to change the law. Remember that loyalty isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when you're scared, even when you're hurt, even when the odds say you should run. We all have a choice, just like Shadow had at that open door. We can retreat into our isolation, convinced we're better off alone. Or we can choose connection, even when it's messy, even when it's complicated, even when the world says it won't work. Shadow chose Ethan. Ethan fought for Shadow. And together, they proved that love, real, unconditional, I'll stand between you and the bear love, is the most powerful force in nature. The question is, what will you choose when your moment comes? If this story moved you, if it reminded you that broken doesn't mean beyond repair, and if you believe that love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds, then subscribe to Wild Heart Stories right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we share stories like this every week. Stories that prove the impossible is possible. Stories that remind us what truly matters. Stories about courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds that change lives. Don't just watch these stories, become part of this community. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter, that they're not too broken, that their story isn't over yet. Together, we're spreading a message the world desperately needs. Love knows no boundaries, and every soul, no matter how wounded, deserves a chance to heal. Subscribe now. Your next life-changing story is just one click away.